What's something you realized about a family member once you got older? Not until the deaths of both my parents did I understand the dynamic of their marriage. My mother died of a stroke at age 66. It turned out that years earlier, she had survived a heart attack which probably occurred in her sleep because no one ever knew about it. When she died, I was dumbfounded that her sisters and friends were all angry at Dad, blaming him for having driven Mom into an early grave. In the 22 years before he died, clues gradually fell into place. I remembered how Mom said his mother had made Dad the person he was. How, when my older brothers brought their families home to visit, Dad sulked and said Mom was going to work herself to death waiting on them hand and foot. How he said the same thing about his second wife and her children and grandchildren. I remembered how Mom refused to have a renewal of vows ceremony for their 25th anniversary, saying she'd meant her vows to be for life the first time, so she didn't see any point. I looked at the photo albums and saw Mom's face change from her engagement, a giddy young woman in love, to an unsmiling older woman. When he said he'd retire at 62 instead of 65 and be home all the time, Mom seemed resigned, not happy. Most telling, I remembered that when Dad was a boy, his mother sometimes punished him by locking him in a closet. What made this particularly terrifying? Grandma was deaf, so his crying, beating on the door and begging moved her not at all. He might well have believed that he could die in that closet. All the facts in front of me the whole time finally made sense. When Dad married Mom, he expected her to be his mommy as much as his wife, because his own mother had been abusive, not loving. It was surely no coincidence that Mom was older by 18 months. Mom died in November, he was engaged by Christmas, and remarried in April, to a widowed nurse 17 years younger, someone who'd outlive him and care for him like both mommy and wife. Dad remarried so quickly not because he didn't love Mom, but because her death had left him as bereft as Theodore Roosevelt when his mother and his first wife died on the same day. When he pouted about Mom's delight in her visiting children and grandchildren, he was jealous. He thought she had a fixed amount of love and any she gave to someone else was less for him. At family gatherings she could be happily chatting with family members, but if he wanted her attention, she had to go with him or he'd sulk. He retired early so he could spend more time with her. He couldn't very well demand that his second wife cut off all contact with her children and grandchildren, but he hadn't forgotten how to pout. Dad and Mom met before he went off to a monastery to spend 3 years. I never understood why, because if he was looking for mother love, he wasn't going to find it in an all-male community. But neither did I understand why he ever dropped out, because he spent so much time in church and in prayer at home that even a priest told me he was overdoing it. When a priest says there's such a thing as too much religion, I'm now convinced that he was trying to back God into a corner. See how devout I am, God. You can't take the person I love away from me. And Mom's refusal to renew her wedding vows? What she really meant, I suspect, was don't ask me if I'd marry you all over again, because you might not like my answer.